Hey folks, it's Aardwolf. Welcome. Today we're going to continue the Compass Expo unboxings with Enemy Action Ardennes. This is the first in the Enemy Action series. I've already got an unboxing of the second volume, that is Enemy Action Kharkov. This has been very well received. It is a John Butterfield design, and because it is a John Butterfield design, I have extremely high hopes for it. I probably didn't need another Bulge game, but here we are. So we're going to take a look inside this baby. It is in, one immediately notices the big fat 3-inch box from Compass. Compass has done a few games in that 3-inch box. So let's open her up. Very much looking forward to taking a look at what we have in here. Battling exhaustion, even as we speak. So let's see what Enemy Action Ardennes looks like on the inside. It is a solid box. We have decks of cards. Now, the interesting thing about this is we got a D10, 2 decks of cards, which we'll take a look at in a bit. The interesting thing here is that this is a solitaire game, but it is also a multiplayer game. You can play this one of 3 ways. You can play it solitaire as the Allies, which are presumably mostly Americans, depending on exactly when the scenarios end. You can play it solitaire as the Germans, or you can play it multiplayer, 2-sided, which you could, of course, do in teams if you wanted to. There are 3 maps here, so let's do that first and take a look at the 3 maps. Okay, so we have one of the 3 maps here, and they're all going to be basically the same, so I'm actually not going to show you all of them, except to give you a little peek at the 3rd one. So this is the German solo game map. So each of the game's 3 modes gets its own map. And map art-wise, this looks really good. Game graphics by Tim Schleif here. Now, we've got these colored arrows here, and this, of course, is one of the solitaire modes. And if we look at the multiplayer or 2-player map, we're going to see that it lacks those arrows. So I suspect strongly that those arrows are similar to the dots that one sees in Butterfield's other designs, such as D-Day at Omaha Beach, which give you directions when you draw the cards on exactly what the enemy is going to do. And these numbers on the hexes assuredly do the same thing. Through our victory point zones here, I think probably everybody watching is probably somewhat familiar with the Battle of the Bulge. We've got the key crossroads of Bastogne right here. We've got Saint-Vite. Elsenborn is up here. Malmedy should be in here somewhere. Filsalm is here. Malmedy is right here. So all of the familiar territory on which the Battle of the Bulge is fought is here. So while we're on the map, let's take a look at the cards. And these are these shrink wrapped? These are not true shrink wrapped. They are instead simply plastic wrapped, which, you know, you're only going to have to deal with that once. So we've got what I see German setup into Allied action cards. So I think these decks are going to end up being sorted into multiple piles, and hopefully we will get them apart without having to shred anything. So Allied action, we got a couple of these. We got Allied command cards. These are presumably activations of either the player or non-player faction. So we've got a bunch of those. Here are German command cards. Here are more Allied command cards. German setup cards. Okay. Opening up pack number 2 slowly and hesitatingly here. I don't feel like I need, because they're not shrink wrapped, I don't feel like I need to cut these open, but that is until I slip and everything flies all over the place. More German setup cards, and I've actually given myself a nice paper cut while unfolding the map, so the cards are guaranteed to be crisp, to say the least. A lot of Allied command cards. Here's some more Allied actions. Here's some more Allied command cards. Here's some more Allied actions. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here, and I think that I've been told that the best way to learn this game is actually to play it 2-player first and then move to the solo modes. And that seems logical to me, since you're going to learn all of the basic stuff in the multiplayer or two-player mode. It seems pretty obvious that the Germans and Allies actually function rather differently. So for an Allied command, we've got 21st Army Group deploy all Allied reserves, and then these codes are going to tell you what to do. Allied actions, attack. So these Allied actions are probably going to tell you what the opponent does. Same deal with the German command cards. So, interesting looking design here. And again, you know, John Butterfield knows what he is doing. So I have complete faith in his ability for this to be an awesome solitaire and multiplayer game, actually. So pulling the cards off here for a moment, we get a bunch of additional stuff. We get a big sort of bundle of stuff, in addition to what looks like multiple counter sheets. Okay, a big bundle of stuff. We have Allied solo rules, German solo rules, and then we have a third booklet, which are the two-player rules, and they're all rather beefy, to be completely honest. So looking first at the two-player rules, we have a 52-page rulebook, full color on a satin finish paper, pretty nicely laid out, relatively large print. We don't have to do any huge eye strain on here. I'm guessing that the vast majority of these rules are in fact rules, or the book, I should say, while not all of it though. So we do have some different scenarios. We've got an initial assault scenario that only lasts a day. We've got an Allied surprise scenario that lasts 3 days. German breakout, 5 or 6 days. And the whole thing, which is up to 14 days. So the whole deal runs into December 29th. Here's Crisis at the Muse. So we've got 5 scenarios, looks like. Credits John Butterfield, developer John A. Foley, game graphics by Tim Schleif, box cover art by Brian Miller and Tim Schleif. A bunch of other credits there as well. We have some designer's notes, always good to read these early. We also have an index, which is nice to see, and a two-player calendar, which I take to be basically the turn record track. So maybe there's a card for that too. There's a lot of cards. And then we have German solo rules, and this feels like it's equally big. This is bigger, 66 pages counting the covers. And once again, same type of format, same type of layout. I find this layout very clear. Color illustrations are not incredibly common, but prominent enough. And then we have the Allied solo rules, which also feel thick. And this runs to 72 pages with the covers. Same type of format, satin finish paper, nice layout, nicely laid out stuff. We have a large stack. I'd say that's about 1/4 inch of cards. Germans, and they're labeled, so you know, hey, this card I use in the German solo mode. So we have our combat procedures. We have hits and step losses, retreats in advance, always a tricky part of, well, not always, but often a tricky part of many war games. German events and tactics, Allied system events and tactics. Interestingly, we have 2 of these for the German solo mode. Now, these aren't all the same, though. There's Allied system intelligence on this one. We have a little bit of a flow chart and key rules summaries. Here we have, and these are on a pretty nice sturdy card stock, and they're 11 by 17 folded in half. Here is a 2-player card. Here is an Allied solo card. Here is all games, so TEC, with both illustrations and all the costs and effects. Nice little stacking limit summary. Nice to have that on the card. Not that you'll really forget that. I mean, that's kind of something you'll remember the whole time. Card and unit reference. This is nice to see. German command card display. And then German unit adjustment display front to back. So presumably, yes, on this one you use German solo. In this one you use Allied solo. Here is addenda. Looks like we have a page, about 1.5 pages, and this is on the cardstock that the player aids are on. Here's your Allied command card display, and it looks like you don't need that. It's equivalent. German setup card organizer. Support the unit placement procedure on the German display. Another Allied card. Another solitaire for Allied solo. For German solo. Here's the German solo calendar, the Allied solo calendar. So these are, in fact, the turn record tracks, and they do come on cards. The footprint here, and there's one for 2 players as well. The footprint here is basically a map and maybe a couple of off-map 8.5 by 11 cards. So we're not talking about an enormous footprint. This is essentially the same footprint that one sees in Enemy Action Kharkov. Now let's look at the counter sheets, which come in a bag. And I'm going to remove them from the bag, which may prove to be an error. Because when these are bagged, usually what that means is that they will very easily punch themselves, and therefore sometimes leading to a mess. Now, these are on a very thick, I don't want to say very thick, but quite thick, brown core stock. And they're that sort of weird layout that you see sometimes with Compass games, where instead of like in sections, they look like 5/8 inch counters anyway. So instead of there being a runner down the middle of the counter sheet, there isn't one. Sometimes that layout of counter sheets can end up making the counter sheet feel flimsy, which implies that the counters themselves are thin, whether that is actually the case or not. Here we have some more counters and quite a few markers. Here we have some more markers. So we've got a total of 3 of these counter sheets, and they don't feel that delicate, I'm happy to report. So clearly we've got here's some Germans, here's some Americans, here's some British, because British did participate in this battle toward the end, and here's some more Germans, along with a bunch of markers. So I feel like these counters are really nice. Now we shall see whether they can be successfully returned to the bag, because I'd like to keep them together and not have to worry about counters rattling around in the bottom of the box and potentially coming loose. Nicely presented here. I'm very happy with the component quality. I could swear that at one point there were some folks complaining about the thickness of the counters in this game, and maybe there's been multiple printings. I don't know. That's possible, but boy, the counters in this copy are certainly fine. Okay, so this has been a quick look at the contents of Enemy Action Ardennes, Volume 1 in the John Butterfield Enemy Action series from Compass Games. Very impressed with the component quality. It looks very nice. I'd like to thank you for watching, and I'd like to thank all the patrons of Ardwolf Slayer for helping to support the channel. It really does make a big difference here and helps us to do all the different types of content that we do. So thank you, patrons. Once again, thank you for watching, and until next time, happy wargaming.